Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I am Daniel Childs. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're keeping safe. Hope you're having a good week. We're about, I'd say, it feels like sort of halfway through. I think once you get to Wednesday evening, it kind of feels a bit more chilled. We're getting closer to the weekend, although we don't have a Chelsea game this weekend. But you can, if you're more pessimistic, you could say that's actually a good thing. We're going to be here kind of looking through some recent Chelsea news, kind of touching on some of the topics, taking your questions. You've already put some good questions in the comment section. Keep those coming. Just to say, we've got a brilliant guest coming on the channel tomorrow, and the podcast is going to be a podcast as well. A guest I've wanted to have on this channel for several years, and I'm glad to say they will be joining me for a Chelsea conversation that I feel like it depends on how long it is, but I assume the first part will be going out tomorrow, unless there's any big news that I have to cover tomorrow evening. It will be on the channel, so please stay tuned for that. Hit that like button if you're doing well. Evening to everyone in the chat. As I said, if you're just joining us, thank you so much for doing so. If you haven't checked out any of the content on the channel this week so far, please go and do so. Check out the podcast. Please do give us, I hate to do all these cheap plugs, but I'll get them out of the way straight away. If you haven't checked out already, please go and check out the podcast, the link in the description box below, and give a positive rating review. It really does help out. But let's get into some of your questions. I did ask for some questions in the chat. Please keep them coming regarding Chelsea. What was the first one here? It was around Callum Jack, who asks, "Hello Dan, mate. As I previously asked in a video a while back, I really do think it's the end for Ruben now. It's sad, but I think his time's up. Do you agree, mate?" It is sad with, I think with Ruben Loftus-Cheek. It's difficult at the moment because, of course, he's been injured for a while, and I do wonder if he's going to be one of those players that is kind of involved against Fulham. I think it depends on what you're looking at with Ruben Loftus-Cheek as a player now. If you see him as kind of a multifunctional, good squad player that you can kind of fill in certain areas, whether that's right wing back, whether just being a central midfielder, who on the odd occasion can have a really good game, as we've seen this season, then I think Ruben's doing a decent job. I think, it's easy to forget some of his performances earlier in the season. I remember the one at home to AC Milan was really, really dominant. And there's always been a talent there. I think that it's just kind of accepting now, and he have his birthday recently. It's just accepting now at like the age of 26, 27 that he probably isn't going to be the player we all wished he could be. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that is out of his control based on that Achilles injury. But I do wonder if this summer may be the time for him to move on. I just always think about the player's own kind of wishes, and I know that Ruben was very public and came out and said, I want to stay at Chelsea, I want to make my career here. But either this window or next window, Chelsea are going to be investing in central midfield. So I think for him, it may be the best opportunity to move on and get some first team football somewhere else, because I still think there is a quality player there who at a different level, a different club, I think could become a starring midfielder. I just don't think he's ever going to be that for Chelsea, in my opinion, which is a shame. It really is. Jacob asks, is Jude still an option for the summer? Jude Bellingham is playing right now, and I don't want to take you guys away from the stream, but I think Mainz and Borussia Dortmund have just kicked off. There's Bundesliga action tonight. I think a lot of the thing with Jude Bellingham is what I'd say is I think there's going to be a lot of movement over the next week and months, and I do think that Chelsea are unlikely to buy Jude Bellingham in the summer if we don't have Champions League football. I think the thing that always gives me hope for someone like Declan Rice is the clear connection he has to this club, and also the Premier League aspect. I think Jude Bellingham, it's dependent on as well on how I think he does and injuries, form, what other midfielders move. But it does feel like Jude is going to be one of those midfielders in the summer that's going to move. I still feel like Real Madrid will just add another talented midfielder to their list, and it'll be Jude Bellingham. But I wouldn't sort of, in my opinion, hang my hat on Jude Bellingham at the moment as a Chelsea midfielder. But I may be proven wrong. I say it's a long way to go until the summer. It really is. Trent Brown, thanks for watching, mate, and asking a question. If Sterling is returning soon, why would we be hesitant to sell Ziyech? Purple patches don't supersede 2 to 3 years of lack of production. I think that's a fair point, mate. I really do. If you're referring to what I talked about in Monday's show, where I was talking about Ziyech and the possibility of him leaving at the end of this season, or sorry, the end of this window. And I was kind of hesitant, and just looking at his recent performances, I'll say this much, right? I think that Ziyech is never going to be, for me, a main player at Chelsea, in the sense that I don't think he'll be here beyond this season, definitely. But I just think it's context-wise, right? And it's also our injury problems this season have been so bad, and it's very easy for us to sit here and go, this player's going to be back, this player's going to be back. And we all say that, but then it's like, as we saw with Reece James and Fofana, they can get injured again, or new players can get injured. So I just think for context-wise, I'll keep him for the rest of the season. And Raheem Sterling coming back is big. Mikhailo Mudryk now, Noni Madueke, Joao Felix will be available for the West Ham game. I think it's the one after Fulham. He isn't available, unfortunately, for the next one, but I agree with you. Let's get into some Enzo Fernandez chat, because I know a lot of you guys are interested in him. I saw the Benfica manager once again was very public, saying he's likely going to remain a player. I was just actually listening to London is Blue Pod, had my good friend Adam Newson and great Chelsea reporter on. Go and listen to their episode, because they dive into some transfers. I know I got a comment in Monday's video being like, oh, why are you so sort of cautious or not that confident about Enzo Fernandez? It's the fact that they want a release clause. It's not like the Mikhailo Mudryk deal, which was a payments over a period of time for Shakhtar Donetsk. And then when we actually realised what the payments were and the actual structuring of that deal, it was actually a lot more favourable for Chelsea, which is where I was proven wrong on Mudryk, because the initial reports made it sound like it was going to be some ridiculous deal. But Enzo, it definitely feels like they are holding firm, and they are within their rights to hold firm with the player they've got, and it's midway through the season, and Chelsea have to put the money out there. I think Expected Chelsea makes a really good point, that he said this several times about Enzo, is you're not going to find another Enzo Fernandez in terms of the profile of player he is. You could probably find comparable players to, say, Declan Rice or Moises Caicedo. But I do agree with a lot of people. I think we have to realistically lean in the direction. I can't see it happening unless Chelsea just think there and go, just pay the release clause, because we're not going to find another midfielder like this. We need to strengthen in central midfield. Let's just do it. Bowley's like, you're going to ban my 8-year contracts in the summer. We're giving him a 10-year contract right now, and we'll be done with it. Chelsea may still do a bit of madness on deadline day. And another thing, Blue Brother here asked the question, do you think we will definitely get one out of Enzo, Rice or Caicedo or Lavia? Locatelli is another name you mentioned there in the summer. I think that in the case of, I want to talk about Caicedo, because I was speaking to Ryan Adset, who's a Brighton fan, on this new football app, Parlay. Definitely go and check it out. I think it's going to be a really good place for football fans to kind of interact. But I've done a few conversations with him about Graham Potter and, Brighton, Chelsea, and Enzo Fernandez. I did one earlier. We spoke about Moises Caicedo yesterday, and just hearing the Brighton perspective of things. I know there are some Chelsea fans kind of having a go at Brighton because they want, surprise, surprise, a massive fee for Moises Caicedo. Chelsea had a 55 million bid rejected. Apparently Arsenal are now trying to hijack a deal that isn't really a deal at the moment for Chelsea and Caicedo, at least the way we know it, that I find quite funny. And apparently some Chelsea fans are kind of like, well, why don't they just give us Caicedo on the cheap? And it's like, no, they don't have to. Like, Brighton are doing amazingly well at the moment, and Caicedo is a massive part of that. And particularly in the January transfer window, with what could be the rest of their season, they could finish within the top 7 and get European football of some kind. Why would you sell your best player on the cheap? And why would you sell it to a club like Chelsea, who need a midfielder and have already spent big on one of your players last summer in Marc Cucurella, and have bought out your head coach for about 20 million in September? So I don't blame Brighton for I don't blame any club. Like if Real Madrid came in tomorrow and said, we want to buy Reece James, none of us are sitting here and going, even with his injury record, none of us are sitting here and going, yeah, it's fine, we'll just give you him for 50 mil. Like, no one. I know that's not exactly the comparable thing between two players, but why are you having a go at Brighton? Like, they are, negotiating wise, are one of the smartest clubs in this league, and they're under no sort of obligation to sell to a bigger club in Chelsea. But in the question of, we just have to see. I mean, I think that maybe someone has asked in the comments, but about Gusto, right? Malo Gusto. I would more hang my hat on that one getting done at the moment, just because of the price, just because of I think Chelsea's need, and I also just can see that one getting done more. I think there's less complications to the Malo Gusto deal than say the Enzo Fernandez and the Moises Caicedo one. I think on both the Enzo Fernandez and the Moises Caicedo one, it's about the money. Canadian Kid comments here: 100 million for Caicedo, might as well get Enzo for 106 million. I do agree with you. If that is the ultimatum, if that is kind of like the question is like, who would you get? I would get Enzo Fernandez. I do think there's been a lot of nonsense around Caicedo. Like, I've heard some really weird things about him, like from Chelsea fans, some of whom I respect, like saying, technically he's not that good. He's a very limited player, only being heightened by a brilliant Brighton system. And I know where some of that's coming from, because people have seen the struggles of Marc Cucurella and have made the assumption that you take any player out of Brighton, they're going to fail. I mean, Ben White is kind of an example that isn't entirely accurate. And I know that Bissouma at Spurs hasn't helped things, but Spurs are Spurs this season. I think there is more than meets the eye at Spurs with Antonio Conte. But in the case of Caicedo, I think this is a very good midfielder. I think he would add something we don't have. But I do think that, if you're asking me between those two, I would definitely say Enzo Fernandez at the moment. And I know some people would kind of go, we probably have more evidence about Caicedo than we do about Enzo Fernandez. But looking at numbers, looking at what he produced in the World Cup in particular, we talk about technical quality and tactical quality, but character-wise, to do that at a young age for your nation, an emotional moment in the World Cup, as big as that in the World Cup, I think just it shows you about the mentality of a player. I know international football isn't always comparable to club football, but you see the quick impact he made on a Benfica team that did really well in the Champions League group stage, and it impresses you, doesn't it? A lot of debates at the moment in terms of, in the comments at the moment. Let me know your feelings on, I'll ask you guys in the comments to let me know a realistic kind of, for deadline day, as we approach deadline day, what is kind of, we all can say Enzo Fernandez, we all can say the dream deal that's going to get done. But if you were to sit here and go, okay, realistically, I'm hanging my hat on that one, or at the end of that deadline day next week, I'll sort of sit there and go, okay, that's fair enough. Would you sort of sit here and go like myself and kind of go, okay, I think Malo Gusto, if that's the last transfer of this window, all right, it's not perfect because we missed out on central midfield again, but it's a good deal for what we need for the rest of the season. I said this in I think Friday's show that I think we can get by in central midfield just about. I think there are exciting players that you could give some minutes to, like Carney Chukwuemeka, Lewis Hall. You've still got Jorginho. You've still got Mateo Kovacic. You've still got Denis Zakaria. So let me know. CJ asked, do you think we'll sign any one of our preferred targets, or do you think we'll do a Zakaria type of deal? I personally think we won't sign anybody. I think the loan system is kind of a little bit awkward for Chelsea. I think we've already made more. We can't make any more loans. I heard different reports around that, whether we could or not. That's a tough thing to know at the moment, whether we could make another loan, but it seems like that Chelsea are walking on edgy ground, not only with FFP but with the loan system. And also that I know Zakaria looks like it might actually turn out to be an all right signing. I'm not a fan of emergency deadline day signings because we can't get our first choices. I'm always of the belief, because I've just seen so many failed Chelsea signings. Listen, even our first choices fail, but I just prefer, with the new recruitment structure, wait. And I know that isn't nice, and I know that a lot of us will kind of roll our eyes and will go, why again, after all this money spent, again, we've missed out on central midfield. And I know we'll probably have performances for the rest of the season or games where we look at that midfield and go, why haven't we signed someone? But I think for the long term, and if this new recruitment team wants to present the idea that it's good in strategy, it can gain value from the market, I just think buying anyone at a ridiculous fee, unless you are confident that player is going to come in and make a real big impact, is just silly to me. It's like Bissouma. Bissouma is kind of like getting Bissouma, who's already failed at Spurs, and then sending Ziyech the other way. I just think that's just like a bad deal. It sparks panic for me. It doesn't spark like strategy, which is my problem. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that Zakaria may downturn in form for the rest of the season. He may return from this injury and not look as good, but I think I could handle having him for the rest of the season. And then we have a conversation whether we buy him or not at the end of it. Absolutely, I agree, Callum. Yeah, we shouldn't get him. We shouldn't get anyone just on a panic. I think it'd be a bad move. I asked, how do you think Kante should be used when he returns from injury? Just wrap him in cotton wool, play him for 20 minutes. Can we make a new law for N'Golo Kante that we can play him like several times during the same game, maybe 20 minutes of each half, and then maybe he won't get injured. I cannot see Kante having more than 10 appearances this season. I said 15 on Twitter, so you can call me a hypocrite. I'm taking that down to 10 now. And I even think saying 10 appearances this season is optimistic. I want to be proven wrong on Kante. I want him to come back. I want him to have one last hurrah at Chelsea, another special run in the Champions League. Trust me, we know the legend that Kante is at this club, but I just cannot see a situation where the problem is with Kante at his age is that you instantly get into protective mode with him, right? You play him one game and you think, well, we can't play him the next game, and then you lose a key player in your midfield, and it's why you cannot build your midfield around Kante. He's not a key player in my opinion, and that's such a shame because I love Kante, and I know people get annoyed at me. They say you're disrespecting his reputation, you're tarnishing his. And no, like, he's been one of our greatest ever signings. I think if I was to ask you now who is like in your top 5 Chelsea signings of all time, I think Kante probably couldn't make that list. I don't think he's the greatest signing of all time in terms of value, but he's one of those, absolutely. So it's just being protective with him, and hopefully we get some decent performances out of him, because when he can get to his best, as we saw against Spurs before he got that injury way back in August, you've got a very special midfielder there, and that's never been in question with Kante. It's always been about how long before he gets another injury, and that's a real problem. Jake asked, do you think we will get Felix on a permanent deal? It's a tough question to answer at the moment, mate, because I think that there was an early suggestion, like briefing shortly after his debut, which sure ended disastrously, but also looked very exciting. And I think there's a lot of hype that Felix could offer something very exciting for the rest of the season. But I still lean in the direction. I just think financially it's not the best deal for Chelsea. Like, it's not weighted in the best way. I think maybe you get to a stage, if Felix does really well, are Chelsea willing to put up the money that Atletico would then demand for Felix to buy him permanently? And also, what would the player want? Would Felix, you are hoping, if you are someone that wants to see us sign Felix permanently, you're hoping that A, he does really well, but also B, that he settles into the club and he sees his future here as a player. He's still a youngish player. I think as a player as well, he probably sees himself as, or would want to get to that stage that I think a lot of people felt he was going to get to when he signed for Atletico back in 2019. Then maybe you could spark a deal there. But I think that it's very hard to know right now because there's so much that could happen for the rest of the season. And we know these owners want to spend big, but there could be players coming back. There could be players to sell. So, and no, he can't play against Fulham, unfortunately, unless they've taken it down to a 2-match ban. I believe it's free. So he was out for the Palace game, he was out for the Liverpool game, and I think he'll be back for the West Ham game. Let me know in the comments if it is the West Ham game. I think it is. Dennis asked, should we sell any of our keepers? I don't think we should, at least at the moment. I think the only question before deadline day for me is, do we loan Gab Slonina or not? Because we've got Marcus Bettinelli, and it's just that question of, for Slonina, is he going to get any game time before the season ends, and is that good for his development as a young player, as a young goalkeeper who's come into Chelsea? I think that's the big question. I don't think we should be selling any of them at the moment. Mendy's still got to come back from injury. There's another one who's got to come back from injury, and we will see. We need to reassess the goalkeeper. I'm not, if what you're kind of alluding to, and I think a lot of Chelsea fans are, is I absolutely think the goalkeeping problem is something that's going to need to be reevaluated at the end of this season. And there were suggestions even as far back as, say, September, October, about Chelsea's new owners looking at a permanent goalkeeper for next summer. And we've heard about David Raya apparently being of interest to some of the big Premier League clubs. So, but no, it makes no sense. I think at this point in the season, unless you are bringing someone in, unless I think that it's just you've kind of got to bite your tongue a bit and just go, yeah, we'll keep him for the rest of the season, and then in the summer when we've got more time, then we can reevaluate. Oh, thank you, Chelsea, for that. Yeah, it is good to be doing a live stream. I want to do more of these just because my schedule is a little bit busier, and hopefully you guys enjoy it and can interact, and hopefully we can do more of these on a regular basis. As I say, I think more and more I'll be doing these as kind of like post-match shows, if you like that. Just to get that content out there, just get my reaction out there, because of course editing takes time, but I still want to be doing the Let's Talk Chelsea's where I'm editing, or stuff like that. But I always wanted to get into live streaming this year, so glad you join me and are watching the show, and please give a like as well. It really does help out the stream if you could hit that like button, share it around, get involved. If you haven't checked out my TikTok, it is I do post mostly like clips from my current shows, to be honest, but go over there, follow on TikTok as well, and do give the podcast a rate and review, link in the description box below. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Edward said Burnley new announcement video is so funny. I have not seen the new one, but they have really, whoever's doing their like social stuff has, from like last summer, I want to say, or even like this time last year. I remember when Weghorst signed for them, they did like a Jurassic Park thing. It was brilliant. Speaking of like Jurassic Park, and speaking of films, I was going to mention this, and I know this has nothing to do. We will get to Thiago Silva, because I did want to speak about Thiago Silva in today's show. Has anyone seen The Last of Us? And I know, again, why is this Chelsea guy speaking about Last of Us? I'm here to listen to Chelsea. I understand. But The Last of Us is genuinely like one of the best adaptations I've ever seen in my life. Like, I loved the first game. I loved the second game. And they've really got it like nailed down, I think. And then the stuff they have done for Last of Us is that they've made it scarier. So I'm sorry if that's like a really weird tangent, but I know people have been loving The Last of Us, and if you want to see a show, go and watch Last of Us, and also play Last of Us, because it's an amazing game. Let's get back to the relevant. I'm here to speak about you, or like here to speak about Chelsea. Let's get back to Chelsea. Callum asks, what's your opinion on Cho's future? I think for him, it might be best to move on. I think particularly when you're buying Mykhailo Mudryk, who looks like he'll probably dominate the left side, and if he stays for 8 years, then you've got a real problem. And I think that Cho could just get into kind of the cycle he's been in at Chelsea for several years, where it's like, is there someone blocking his path, or is there just a sense that he's kind of at a dead end at Chelsea? And it's why I wanted him to go out on loan this season. And I think that you kind of got to put the ball in Chelsea's sort of park this summer as a player. I think that Chelsea, we're getting down to the stage now where this summer, I think Callum Hudson-Odoi will be into his final 12 months. So it will be at the stage effectively where Chelsea have to make a decision on him. Do you sell him, or do you try and give him a new contract? And it's also about convincing Callum Hudson-Odoi to sign a new contract. Watching Callum at Bayer Leverkusen, I was there in September to watch the game. And he was actually playing as a number 10 in the 4-2-3-1 at that point. And Xabi Alonso hadn't arrived. But I've really enjoyed watching him in the Bundesliga. And I actually think for him, it'd be exciting to see him stay in the Bundesliga. I just think it'd be a good league for him. And maybe just it's a nice environment switch, cultural switch. And I think that's helped him. I think, I remember his interview with Raphael Honigstein earlier in the season, where he was talking about the likes of Jeremy Frimpong, Diaby, who he's been hanging around with, and the players there who a lot of them speak English. He's been able to kind of embed himself in that community, and it's really nice to see. And I love seeing English players go abroad, whether that's to Italy, whether that's to Spain, whether that's to Germany. I think it's really exciting. So I think he will be moving on in the summer, and I think that's probably best for his career. And I know a lot of people kind of shrug their shoulders and go, he was never good enough for Chelsea anyway, but I just think for his own career, it's probably better that he moves on with Chelsea seriously investing in wide players. And it's not just Gary asks here, Pulisic stay or leave. If Pulisic stays, it's the case where it's tough for me to know unless I've got it all written out in front of me, but and I'm sure we'll do this on the channel in the upcoming months as we get close to the summer. I think if enough players leave, if Pulisic leaves, if Ziyech leaves, if we don't sign Felix permanently, I think that then maybe he stays, but then maybe the player just thinks to himself it's time for a switch, and he feels like the the year in the Bundesliga kind of gave him a perspective that it is time to move on. That in itself is going to be interesting. Trent asks, when will Bowley and the boys buy another club, and in what country? Chelsea have a lot of youngsters and can't afford more Ampadu Gilmore loans. I know that Portugal was one of the ones they originally looked at. Portimonense was a club they bid for. I wouldn't be surprised if it is in the French league or the French second tier, because of the Lawrence Stewart connection with Monaco, the deal they just did for Benoit Badiashile, the deal they could be about to do for Malo Gusto. I think that France, as my good friend and great creator at Chelsea, Joe Tweeds, always says, I think France is a really good market for players. So I think that would be a good place to go for me. I think that would be, probably won't be a top tier team, but I agree with you that I absolutely understand the logic of, we've seen in recent years, loans are not an exact science. I think Chelsea went through, and maybe I fooled myself in kind of my analysis, that I looked at the batch of loans for, say, Tammy Abraham, Fikayo Tomori, Mason Mount, Reece James, that went really well over a period, and we had more that went really well. And you just kind of think, well, then that's going to continue. Obviously, it doesn't. Billy Gilmore's loan at Norwich last season did not go well at all. We've had recent ones that just haven't worked out, and it's not an exact science. It's not. It's not an exact science to know what's going to work and what's not. So I think having more control, as Todd Bowley said, and particularly if they keep on buying these young talents, and maybe they're too young to kind of instantly go on a loan, or instant to come into the first team, but you want to send them somewhere to get that first team football. For instance, this season, like an Amari Hutchinson, like a Cesare Casadei, you would have the opportunity there. So I'm going to say France, but I could see it being in Portugal as well. I think Portugal would be a little bit more fun if there's some good weather, and I'd personally probably take out a trip to see whoever that is, what club. So Rodney, hi mate, thanks for watching. Hope you're doing well. Hopefully we can catch up soon. Rodney's a great guy, great Chelsea fan, regular at Stamford Bridge and home and away as well. Just looking at Thiago Silva. Okay, before I go, I want to speak about Thiago Silva. Right, that's one of the things I put in the title. Thiago Silva looks like he's going to be signing a new contract. I know that The Athletic, let me just get who wrote it. It was Simon Johnson yesterday. Chelsea have opened talks with Silva about a new contract. The Brazil international's current deal expires at the end of the season, but Chelsea want him to stay for another 12 months. He turned 38, in September. And I was having this conversation with my dad that will Thiago Silva become the oldest player in Premier League history? Oldest outfield player. I don't think he's going to become the oldest player in Premier League history, because if you go on, if you search that right now, it's mostly goalkeepers. But outfield, I think Teddy Sheringham was just over 40 when he retired at West Ham. So he's in line for that accolade. I mean, it's one of a few accolades that, Thiago Silva, out of all the accolades he's made. But I think that Thiago Silva, for me, he's Chelsea's player of the season. Do you disagree in the comments? I don't know. I know it's been a tough season, but I don't know who's been better or more consistent than Thiago Silva this season. And it, positive and negative, again, it's a defensive player, doesn't really speak much to the attack, and it's an older player who you're kind of looking for younger players to thrive. But Thiago is just a privilege to watch play for Chelsea. He really is. I said this from the start, and I think that I said this from the start with Thiago Silva, that he instantly reminded me of kind of 2014-15 JT, which was, and JT obviously was in the crowd. Wonderful to see him in the away end at Anfield with Chelsea fans at the weekend. But I just, watching Thiago Silva was like that, not prime JT. You could kind of argue prime JT is kind of like 2004 to 2007, like that first Mourinho era. But I look at Thiago Silva and just the excellence, and the shame of it is, and I'm guilty of this, right? I think we all are. We just expect a certain level of performance from Thiago. He gives us that on a regular basis, and you kind of just, I've been guilty in recent weeks where I don't really pick it out. And he's comfortably man of the match, because, well, it's like, that's Thiago Silva. That's who he is. and you just kind of go, well, yeah, he's brilliant. He's Thiago. That's what it is. And maybe I should be giving more credit. The brilliant Thiago, Thomas Tuchel quote about him being, I think it was almost this time last year, he mentioned it. He said that what was it, the Benjamin Button, Thiago Button of football, in one of Silva's one of Tuchel's best press conferences. So Silva, I agree, Callum, and you guys, if you hit that like button if you think that Thiago Silva should be Chelsea's player of the season, unless Reece comes back and absolutely storms things and touch wood stays fit for the rest of the season, then I think we have a conversation. But other than him, I mean, you kind of are looking at, I think for a few weeks, Trevor Chalobah was decent. That's the most scary thing at the moment, isn't it? Like, you're kind of like, who competes with Thiago Silva for player of the season? And maybe I'm just being an idiot right now. Like, I don't know who beats Thiago Silva or even competes with him other than Reece James before he got injured. Like, no one has come close, not even like remotely close. I mean, in terms of numbers, you could look at Kai Havertz and Raheem Sterling for like actual goals in the season. They're two of our better providers, but I wouldn't say in terms of performance either of those. Callum says Kepa, I mean, Kepa for a period looked like he was gonna just make us all look stupid about his opinions, but unfortunately, I really hope for Kepa as a good end to the season, because I still think he'll be our main choice for first choice goalkeeper, because I just think technically he probably offers what Potter needs. But for Thiago Silva, I really hope he does that. If he stays for 40, that'd be a wonderful landmark for his career, and would just speak to the defensive icon he already is. And also, it's just a privilege watching Thiago Silva play football. If you have not seen Thiago Silva play live, it's like watching Eden Hazard play live, but you're watching a defensive icon at his best, at his pomp. And just the thing you don't get on TV is unfortunately with the angles of TV, when you're actually at the stadium and you can watch Silva, and the many times with sort of my vantage point in my season ticket is looking down and watching the way he marshals the defence, watching the way he spots trouble before it arises, is just, it's been an absolute privilege. And it's right that Chelsea fans love him. And I know everyone always says this, but could you imagine if we had got him like 5-6 years earlier? Could you imagine a scenario where we would have John Terry and Thiago Silva next to each other? That would have just been illegal, probably. The football gods would have never allowed it. I'll answer a couple more questions here, so please put them down in the comments. Caribou asked thoughts on Thuram. I think that would be a good deadline day signing. Thuram, I would have liked him a few years ago. I think that for Gladbach, he was a really exciting forward. And to be fair, he's had a good year for Gladbach. He really has. It may turn out to be that. We've heard about Chelsea's interest in that. So yeah, we will see. Apparently, I've just noticed there's of course Mason Mount debates going on in my comment section. What a surprise. But yeah, I mean, I think that Thuram, we will see. I mean, deadline day, just some of the stuff I've been hearing. Let's go for Canadian Kid here asking a question. What player jersey will you get end of transfer window? I'm getting Mudryk. It's hard for me to know. I mean, someone asked me the other day, who's your favourite player in the current Chelsea squad? And I guess about 10 or 12 years ago, I probably would have been able to answer that question easily. Like the Diego Costa era, of course, I would have answered that question very easily. And of course, like the Eden Hazard era, I would have mentioned that easily. But maybe Reece James, one of the new signings, I probably wouldn't be getting a shirt right now. I'd have to see what they do. If Mudryk wins us the Champions League, then I reconsider it. And of course, with Mudryk, I know I'm going to get a lot of crap for the rest of the season for what I said at the time and a jokey tweet that I made about, that was actually referencing Arsenal fans, stupid Arsenal fans, you know, all these conspiracy theories around him. And I wasn't actually having a go at Mudryk, but there it is. Final question here. Super Tommy Tuchel. Be honest, would you give Lukaku another chance? Look at what Potter did with Welbeck. I just think that my problem is I like Lukaku as a player, and I always have done, even before he came to Chelsea, and even after, you know, what happened last season. I just think there is too much toxicity around Lukaku. I just think there's too many people who just would despise him coming back, and I think he'd be up against something so much that I think it'd be very difficult for him to prove people wrong. And he's comfortable in Inter Milan. He likes the environment. It clearly works for him as a player. I think tactically it works for him, that league, a lot better. I think that has passed Lukaku at Chelsea, unfortunately. I mean, I would have loved to have seen him lead us to a Premier League title and score bundles of goals, but he's getting a little bit older. He's had some injury problems this season, and I know there'll be a lot of Chelsea fans who just wouldn't have him back, and that's a shame because I think that Lukaku, I think, still could offer you goals, but I also think it's a tactical thing. With Lukaku, we've seen this across football at the moment. With if you have players, particularly in the final third, who do not press, you've got real problems. I do think that's going to be a massive debate point in football moving forward. I really do, particularly with players like Rafa Leao, for instance, who I know doesn't have the most amazing pressing stats, but you watch him play for Milan. Again, it's Liga. It's the Serie A, and he's playing really well for Milan. But you watch him and you think, even at Stamford Bridge, and you watch him and you think that's a serious player. So I wonder if in years to come that's going to become a big thing. I really do hope that he doesn't go Spurs. Because I think Conte is going to leave Spurs at the end of this season, as we saw. So there we go. That is the live stream. 205 watching right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on the playback, thank you as well for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow, as I say, either with the first part of an incredible guest I'm getting onto this channel that I think we're going to have a really good Chelsea conversation. As I say, you want to stay tuned for that. Want to make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for all the interactions. Thank you for all the new subscribers. We've passed not only 30k but 30.1k. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for getting involved in the stream, and as I say, if you like it, hopefully we're going to be doing more streams, and I hope you have a great Wednesday evening, Wednesday night. I hope you chill, watch the football, watch some Bundesliga football, watch the League Cup. Hopefully Forest will beat United. And I will see you again very soon. All the best.